Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host and the founder of StelliumAstrology.com. I'm also a tutor at the London School of Astrology and the former horoscope columnist for Elle Magazine UK. And today I had a slightly different show planned for you. We've just worked our way through all of the Zodiac signs, and so that's been 12 weeks of just pure sun signs, pure Zodiac signs. So actually, this is the first episode of 2021, which is a bit of a weird one because it's not really, it's something we have to cover, I think, and I thought, why not stick it on the end of the Zodiac signs? But actually, it's not really something that we should really need to cover in astrology. However, I thought it would be useful for you, for your repertoire, to have in your to have to hand the knowledge in case somebody goes, oh, you believe in astrology? Well, what about the 13th Zodiac sign then? So you can probably just slap them down with a bit of knowledge, which is always interesting because when people think about astrology, when people argue against astrology, usually they're basing their knowledge of the subject on sun signs only. And I love the look on people's faces when I say, well, which branch are you discussing? I'm guessing if you're talking about Ophiuchus, you must be talking about constellational astrology as opposed to tropical, the constellational zodiac as opposed to tropical zodiac. Or maybe you're talking about sidereal, but I'm not sure exactly which branch of sidereal you're discussing. It's just fun to, and usually what I say to them as well is I say, oh, I'd love to talk about it. How much research have you done on the subject? How many years of study have you put into astrology? And when they say, well, none, you can say, well, I'm not going to waste my breath talking to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. But if you do want to waste your breath, this is a show which is going to equip you with some information that should give you a good, at least make you sound like you know what you're talking about when it comes to this subject, which really isn't something that is considered an astrological, definitely not something that really Western astrologers would include in their astrological toolkit. However, some do. And I don't know a great deal about it, but this is what I do know, and this is what I'm sharing with you today. So I hope you enjoy it, and happy 2021, everybody. Today I just wanted to talk a little bit about something a bit different, which is whether or not there really is a 13th Zodiac sign. So obviously, you may have missed this. This may be something that hasn't entered your consciousness because, I don't know, maybe you haven't caught the news in the past few years, or perhaps it's just not been on your Facebook feed. But actually, there has been a little bit of a rumour going around, and it kind of resurfaces every now and again. I think the last time, I can't remember if it came out this year or if it was the year before. So it may have been 2020 or 2019, this kind of all did the rounds again. But the time before that, I think it was probably about 2015 or 2016. And everybody was freaking out because of two things that were going on. And one of the things that was going on was that, your zodiac sign isn't right because the constellations have moved. And the other one was that there's a 13th zodiac sign. And this came out in the news because I think NASA published an article on their website, which was an article for children, I think. It's kind of the section of their website that explains astronomy to younger people. And the media just run wild with this. They love it. I think it's just when there's nothing else to report on, when there's nothing big going on in the world, they just push out this story and just... it goes wild for a while, and people that have missed it the previous times freak out because they're like, oh my gosh, I really believed in astrology and now it's all a load of rubbish because of this. But actually, it doesn't discredit astrology at all, and it really wouldn't hurt for people to actually do a little bit of research just to see what exactly is going on. But I can understand that there's a lot of people out there who don't really know where to look when it comes to researching astrological ideas or even astronomical ideas, really, because there's just The internet is so huge. It's just like walking into the biggest library in the universe and not having a clue where to start. Now, I have my little assistant Archer in here with me. It's not that Lana doesn't like you guys. She never seems to gate crash. But Lana's much more of a... she's less of a... Well, she's not a podcast crasher, that's for sure. Archer, you're going to come up. Come on. Archer, come on. He's nudging my legs and nudging the boxes. Are you coming up here or are you staying down there? And he's got his winter coat on at the moment, so he's extra puffy. So's Lana. But yeah, she's sitting out in the other room sunbathing on her little high bed thing that she's got, which puts her just out of reach of Archer, who just cannot leave her alone. He just likes to bite her and chase her around. And they play together. They get on with each other. It's not that he's bullying her or anything. He's just a boy cat with lots of testosterone. And she's a very attractive young female cat, so she gets it a bit of the time from him. A bit of sexual harassment going on in this house. Cat sexual harassment. Anyway, I digress. Now I have my assistant Archer with me. Whew, keeping my lap warm. So, let's talk about Ophiuchus, this 13th Zodiac sign. NASA announced a few years back that there was a 13th Zodiac sign. We've clarified that. But actually, this isn't new information. This isn't brand new information. This is information that has been around since the 2nd century, because Ptolemy actually referenced the Serpent Bearer constellation. And that's what Ophiuchus is. Ophiuchus is a Serpent Bearer, or the Serpent Bearer. Now, we have to first identify the fact that astrology and astronomy, though were at one point both considered subjects that went hand in hand, for many, many years now, they haven't been. It's been widely acknowledged. The scientific community wants to really give astrology a wide berth and really wants to dissociate itself with astrology, especially astronomy. Astronomy really doesn't want to be associated with astrology. And the astrological community we don't mind if there's a connection between astrology and science, but officially that connection hasn't been there for many years. So the first publication which documented astronomy as a separate entity from astrology... Archer! Archer just started chewing on there. No! Oh my God! He was just going to... Oh, for goodness sake. He's a vandal. He likes to vandalise things. I'm sorry. Anyway, the first publication which documented astronomy as a separate entity from astrology, which triggered its academic decline, was started in the 1679 yearly publication of La Connaissance des Temps. I don't know if I said that right. So this is an article I've written on my website. I'll share the link. Prior to that, astrology was considered a highly regarded and pertinent area of study in the 12th and 13th centuries. And, Isaac Newton was also an astrologer as well as an astronomer. It wasn't something that was frowned upon, not like science looks at astrology today and frowns upon it. And it all happened because the model of the solar system changed from being geocentric, which is Earth-centred, to heliocentric, which means sun-centred. As soon as they realised that the sun we were all orbiting the sun, that's when... and they realised that the world doesn't revolve, the solar system doesn't revolve around them on planet Earth. That's when it all went a little bit squiffy. But that doesn't really matter anyway, because that is when NASA, but astronomy and astrology parted ways. So it's interesting that NASA would be so invested in spreading information about this new zodiac sign, because it's really not anything to do with NASA at all, because astronomy and astrology are no longer the same subject, and they haven't been for a very long time. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, what does this 13th zodiac sign mean? To be honest with you, I will say it doesn't really mean much. It doesn't really mean much at all. Now, just for those of you who do encounter people who do want to talk about this and maybe get a bit passionate about how astrology is a load of rubbish. I mean, each to their own. If they haven't got the ability to open up their perspective and to understand the potential or the possibility that there could be something in it and actually do a little bit of research for themselves. It might not be worth wasting your breath. However, if you do happen to want to talk to somebody about this and share your information, the next time they talk about a 13th Zodiac sign, you can say, oh, which Zodiac are you using? Because there are really three branches. We have the tropical Zodiac, the sidereal Zodiac, or the constellational Zodiac. Now, the tropical Zodiac, as I said way back at the beginning when I started this podcast back in July 2020, my goodness, I didn't even know what year it was then. That's what kind of year we've had. The tropical Zodiac is the Zodiac that I use, and the tropical Zodiac, as I mentioned, with all the cardinal signs, so Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, they're all pinned to the solstices and the equinoxes. And that means that the sun crosses over that point, and that gives us our new season. So spring, summer, autumn, and winter, the beginning, the instigating moment of those seasons is when the sun crosses over those points. And those points where we've got Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, it's based mostly on the seasons and actually the zodiac signs. And the way that we decide which zodiac signs fit into that is if you look at our equator on planet Earth, if you let that equator, imagine now that the equator is a band that is reaching out into the solar system, and it draws a line in the sky above where it falls on our planet Earth, then the constellations which happen to be crossing over that extended equator, that's called the ecliptic, and that is the zodiacal belt. So that is where we get our zodiac signs from. The sidereal zodiac, which is used in Vedic astrology or Jyotish, that is tied to the actual constellations. And the constellational zodiac is the modern zodiac, which includes Ophiuchus, which is the supposed new zodiac sign with the new dates, which I would prefer to call more accurately NASA's zodiac, because it's their little zodiac that they've decided to change something that is so ancient and predates any of our modern historical records, going all the way back to ancient Babylon. So, they're taking an ancient craft and they're modernising it. You could say that the church has modernised itself as it still continues to practice its religion and include, things that were once considered a taboo. But I don't necessarily think that it's very comparable in that sense, because it's not like the zodiac was, against gay marriage or something like that, or, a woman should stay married to somebody if they're violent and her life's in danger because of the sacred oath that they make when they get married. It's another zodiac sign, which is it's always been, this constellation of Ophiuchus has always been there. It was acknowledged at a certain point, but that doesn't mean that there's nobody's suffering as a consequence of having Ophiuchus in the zodiac, or whether it's in there or not. Nobody's suffering as a consequence of that. So that's why I think that that's a bit ridiculous of NASA, in the same way that they've decided to downgrade Pluto and it's not a planet anymore. Fine, it's a dwarf, if you want to call it a dwarf, but that doesn't mean we're not going to practice it in astrology. It's still very much a valid... I mean, if you've ever had a Pluto transit, I have had a Pluto transit across various points of my chart. Most of us will have a Pluto transit of some description in our lifetime. Well, we all will in our lifetime. It's something that's incredibly poignant and profound. So it's something that astrology is a very different craft. It's not a science. You might want to call it an art. I think it's a craft, and it's something that requires study and patience and practice. So if there's somebody sitting there arguing about this 13th zodiac sign, if they haven't done the study and had the patience and done the practice, then they're really not... You can't argue on a subject that you have done no research on. So, in a nutshell, the zodiac signs and the constellations are two entirely different things. Now, the reason why the sidereal and the Vedic, like the sidereal /Vedic /Jyotish zodiac, is tied to the constellations, it's because there's something called the Procession of the Equinoxes, which means that the zodiac, that the stars in the sky, including the fixed stars, fixed being an apt name for them because they do tend to seem to stay put. Even those fixed stars actually move, and it takes a long time. I can't remember off the top of my head how long, but it takes a long time for these stars to move a degree. Okay, so here I found my article, and it says here that the sidereal zodiac takes into consideration the precession of the equinoxes, or axial precession as astronomers refer to it. The original discovery of precession dates back to Hellenistic Greece, where Hipparchus compared the astronomical observations of his predecessors and discovered that the fixed star Spica had moved 2 degrees relative to the autumnal equinox over the space of a few hundred years. So there's a quote here from Wikipedia. It says, "In astronomy, axial precession is a gravity-induced, slow and continuous change in the orientation of an astronomical body's rotational axis. In particular, it can refer to the gradual shift in the orientation of the Earth's axis of rotation in a cycle of approximately 25,772 years." Just approximately. It's a it's a huge cycle, approximately 26,000 years. That means that actually over time, I mean, in my sidereal birth chart, I'm a Sagittarius with a Taurus ascendant. I am not a Sagittarius with a Taurus ascendant according to tropical astrology, which is what I use. I'm a Capricorn with a Gemini ascendant. Interestingly, I am in a relationship with a Sagittarius with a Taurus ascendant. That's an interesting little thing that I've noticed, that these things do echo. And, my ascendant sign, Gemini, the ruling planet of that is Mercury, and it's in conjunction with Venus, which is the ruler of Taurus. So there could be a small flavour of Taurus in my chart anyway, based on that. And Frank Clifford, my mentor and the principal of the London School of Astrology, always says, "There is no definitive way to read a chart. With a good vocabulary and technique, all roads can lead to Rome." And he's right. Now that goes to say, you could go and see a sidereal Vedic astrologer, a Yachtish astrologer, and they could read your chart and give you a completely different reading, but actually it describes you well. But you could go and see a tropical astrologer who gives you a different type of reading, and that also describes your situation. I think they're all different ways of looking through a different kind of lens and interpreting things in a way which speaks to you when you're ready to receive the information. Aside from that, just to let you know that, like I said, they're two completely, so zodiac signs and constellations are completely different things. The zodiac signs may have been based on the constellations back in the Babylonian times when we have our earliest records of astrology, but who knows if it was around longer than that. I have a feeling it may have been. But, it doesn't mean that it's a definitive thing and that we have to follow the zodiac signs through the precession of the equinoxes. And we definitely don't need to start worrying that we've left one out all these years and suddenly astrology doesn't make sense. It's not the case. There are 88 constellations in the sky, and Ophiuchus is just one of them. So just bear that in mind. It's a weird thing to have to try and factor in that there could be a 13th zodiac sign. My personal feeling is I've survived this long without it, and I don't need to include it. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not the way the Babylonians did it, and a lot of the way I practice astrology is based on, I even use the equal house system, which is the oldest house system, the equal divisions of the houses in the sky. We'll get onto houses at a later date. So the dates of Ophiuchus are supposedly from November the 29th to December the 18th. So that's between Scorpio and Sagittarius. So between Scorpio and Sagittarius, so go from the underworld of Scorpio and suddenly you're in the highest reaching peaks of Sagittarius, that eagle flying in the sky looking down. There's something in between, supposedly. And this is potentially Ophiuchus, if you want to look into this and are curious to discover. So, just so you're aware, Ophiuchus, though the sun does pass through a part of Ophiuchus on the ecliptic, between the dates of November 29th to December 18th, Ophiuchus is much closer to the Hercules family of constellations. So even though the sun does pass through it, the Babylonians didn't include it. However, if you are somebody who uses fixed stars in astrology, which trust me, even I like to use some fixed stars. I'm not an expert on fixed stars. I'm very interested in them, and astrology is a constant learning journey. There are some great astrologers out there that do fixed stars. One of them is a great friend of mine, Marina, at Dark Star Astrology, and she does a lot of fixed stars interpretations, and I'm still very much exploring them all. But you know, you can interpret the fixed stars. So even if you're not including a constellation, those fixed stars are there, and you can read what happens when the sun passes those fixed stars. So there's still a great deal of study that goes into this, which means that we haven't missed out Ophiuchus. We just don't have an actual constellation of Ophiuchus or a zodiac sign of Ophiuchus. We don't include that in the tropical zodiac. So basically, the fixed stars in Ophiuchus have a Saturnian and Venusian, that's Saturn and Venus, kind of quality about them. So that is you could call a Saturn-Venus combination a bit of tough love, maybe, or serious creativity, or like serious creative potential, or creative blocks, you could call it, or the lack of a fountain of youth. But actually, if we look into the mythology, which is how we really learn about the essence of the zodiac signs and the planets, we generally tend to look at mythology. So the Ophiuchus constellation is generally connected, or Ophiuchus, the Serpent Bearer, is generally associated with the god of medicine, Asclepius. Now, like I said, Ophiuchus is the Serpent Bearer. And if you think about the symbol of the serpent, which I think is quite interesting, and the serpent is hugely a profound symbolic image. So if we look at, for example, the Bible, we have the snake that gave the apple to Eve and told her to eat the apple. And there could be some arguments over whether or not that snake was offering Eve knowledge for independent thought, or whether or not he was actually tricking her to get her banished from the Garden of Eden. And actually maybe the snake was a symbol of Satan or hell, or, you know, temptation. You could argue over the meaning of the snake with a modern lens, looking through a modern lens. But then you've got the idea that Lilith, the original wild woman of the Garden of Eden, and a point in astrology, a calculated point that we now are researching a great deal more, which is connected to, feminist ideals, rebellion, and a lot of other interesting things, which I also do a lot of research into. She was part snake as well. So, and she was already in the Garden of Eden. So we have this symbol of a snake. Now, if you look at something like the ambulance, or like if you ever go to like a hospital or a pharmacy, there's usually a symbol of a snake wrapped around a kind of wand, and sometimes there's two snakes wrapped around, which that symbol is called the caduceus, which is connected to Mercury, who had his own caduceus, and these two snakes wrapped around a wand, or a single snake wrapped around a wand, is usually the symbol of medicine. But you could connect it also to perhaps looking at the double helix, a DNA sort of symbol, I think discovered by Francis Crick. But also it is connected to medicine, really. Its connection to medicine. The Kundalini, the snake that goes up the spine. So there are some very interesting ideas around serpents and also their power and their mystical abilities. And in this particular myth, Ophiuchus, or Asclepius, I should say, who he's associated with, was the son of Apollo and Coronis. And Coronis had an affair while she was pregnant and carrying Apollo's son Asclepius, which really annoyed him. I don't blame him. I would be kind of annoyed myself. And he told Zeus to strike her down with a lightning bolt, which he did. So that killed her. And while she was dead, they operated a cesarean on her, and took Asclepius out. So interesting as well, because I was thinking about the fact that Caesarion is something that is connected to Julius Caesar, and it's said that he was born by Caesarion, but he kind of made Caesarian's it was named after him, obviously, Caesar and Caesarion, but it's a much more commonly used term and procedure since those times. So Asclepius does exist in both Greek and Roman mythology. However, the Caesarian is a procedure that I think is very connected to Caesar. Whether or not that's, historically correct or not, I am not a historian, I'm an astrologer. However, they took Asclepius out, and he was then raised by a centaur called Chiron. And Chiron has a very important point to look at in astrology. It's an asteroid which is connected to the wounds that we carry, our deepest wounds, which we can't heal ourselves from, but we learn how to cope and how to heal other people through our personal experience. So another interesting connection here, because Chiron, a centaur, like Sagittarius, half man, half horse, except Chiron isn't a constellation, he's an asteroid, one of a few centaur asteroids that orbit around, I think Chiron has a 50-year orbit and has a very interesting impact in our own personal journey. And if you're interested in reading about Chiron, there's a brilliant astrologer called Melanie Reinhardt, and she is the Chiron go-to girl. Like, she is so clued up, and she's got, I think there's Chiron and the Healing Journey, which is I think the most popular book, and it's a bit of a cookbook style. It's got what Chiron means in the signs and houses. And Chiron, the symbol for Chiron looks like a key. It looks like a little circle on the bottom, and coming out of it is a kind of a K shape with the circle at the bottom on the back part of the K. So it looks like a little key, and perhaps you could see that key as the key to your own healing journey and having some deeper insight. So it's interesting that Chiron, the healer, was then raised Asclepius, and Chiron actually raised Asclepius to become a master doctor and healer, a god of medicine, and he became a demigod. So that's the story of Ophiuchus, or that's the story of Asclepius, who is partially connected to Ophiuchus and this Serpent Bearer, this serpent imagery, I think. And when we think about the Venus and Saturn as well, we can look at it as, Venus being that relationship aspect and Saturn being the kind of boundaries or tough lessons that we have to learn. Putting those two together, Venus, Saturn, we might have the story of Apollo and Coronis, and the heartache that Apollo suffered at Coronis' adultery, and perhaps the difficult relationship he may have had with Asclepius as a result of that, which could have led to perhaps this difficulty and this pain that led to Asclepius becoming an amazing healer, because this generational wound that he was carrying. However, that's kind of the story, and there's not much I can go into with Ophiuchus because I don't really know much about an actual astrological spin on it. That's the astrology of it for you. And like I said, there've always been new bodies being discovered. Up until, a few hundred years ago, a couple of hundred years ago, we didn't know that there was anything beyond Saturn. And so the traditional planets going up to Saturn were all we thought really existed. And at one point we thought that the solar system was geocentric, Earth-centred, and not heliocentric. I know there's some people out there that still disagree and think that we live on a flat Earth, and that the sun revolves around the Earth in that respect. Whatever your belief system, to be honest with you, I can't prove either way. All I can say is that I am a believer in a non-flat Earth. I just am. And there are always new bodies being discovered. So like I said, we're now currently really interested in this hypothetical point, this calculated point Lilith, Chiron and the other centaurs, not including Sagittarius, have all got their own rich mythology. and those bodies are not the same. You don't interpret them like a planet. It's a very different type of interpretation, and like I said, Melanie Reinhardt's book is a very interesting one to read, and great in cookbook style, so you get to sort of like pick and choose and put things together. And I know other astrologers, like my friend Vicky, who's not particularly, she doesn't want to come on the show because she's very private, but she is also an excellent centaur astrologer. She does a lot of work with the centaurs, and it's fascinating. So like I said, we've got that, and we've got dwarf planets. So we've got Eris now, who is a very, very, very slow moving body. She's been in Aries for a very, very, when I say a very long time, I think centuries or something. And there's so many dwarf planets. Ceres, Eris, Maker, and Huima or Hauma. There's so many, and they're always finding new bodies. And I know that there's a lot of work going into interpreting Ceres as well. I don't know about the others as such. But then we've also got other points like there's got Vesta, Pallas, Juno, Hygeia, Cupido, Hades, Zeus, Kronos. There's so many. Sedna, Eris, so many, and lots of different astrologers doing different interpretations of these. I know some. I have been doing research on Lilith. I'm doing a class for the London School of Astrology on Lilith. I'm just putting those slides together and getting it ready, and it should probably be available in the new year. But there's always stuff to be researching in astrology, and no two astrologers are really the same. We all have our own little things. I think I was saying to somebody else that astrology is a bit like, I don't really want to put astrology and religion together, but it's like Abrahamic religions. There is the umbrella of the Abrahamic religions, but underneath that umbrella there are just so many different branches, down to even when you get into Christianity, so many different branches of Christianity and differing variations that, it makes it difficult to be able to understand exactly who's right, but it all comes down to perspective and the way that you interpret things. And it's the same with astrology, except it's not a religion. Astrology is not a religion. Astrology is a craft, and it's based on ancient research. And it's something that if you get into astrology and you really give it the time to research it yourself, you really do understand that there's something in it. And I'm always humbled by the magic of astrology and what it does for us. So yes, that's kind of it. That's just what I wanted to say, that really fixed stars mean we've always included aspects of Ophiuchus as astrologers. They've always been included to an extent, especially if you go to a fixed star astrologer and you've got anything hanging around those points, then that is something that will have been interpreted in your chart. And I would just say, if I could leave you with anything as far as this is concerned, I don't think that really there's any need to include Ophiuchus at all. I know a lot of other astrologers don't. It's not really a point. I know one of my community members, one of my very early community members, Brian, he considers himself as somebody with sun in Ophiuchus, and I don't think he knows too much about it. He's very interested in it, and he's cast his chart for it, and there's a calculation on astro.com. I'll have to ask him to send me the how to do it, because I'm not entirely sure myself. But he's found his chart including Ophiuchus. So if you wanted to have a look and see what your chart looked like with Ophiuchus in it, you can do. But it's something that I am all for people questioning the methods, trying to understand it for themselves. So do your own research, look into the myth of Ophiuchus. If you've got your sun between November 29th and December 18th, or any of your planets between those points, definitely look at that myth, look at the mythology around Ophiuchus, read around some of the other myths that are there too. Do you happen to be somebody who's got into a healing profession, or do you consider yourself to be a healer in some way? Did you come from, did your parents have a cesarean section when you were born? Was your mum unfaithful to your father while she was carrying you? Just try and make connections to see whether this makes sense. It may not make any sense. You may not relate to it at all. But all I'm saying is you should satisfy your own curiosity as far as this is concerned. And even more so, I believe this than ever, having read The Science Delusion by Dr. Rupert Sheldrake and looking at the fact that the Earth's, well, basically, science is based on a very mechanistic outlook. It's very based on a particular scientific belief system, which doesn't want to credit anything that doesn't fit into mechanism. And things that we take as 100% a total given, like something like the clock in our house that has got, 12 divisions of 60 minutes each, which makes it a very tidy round number for us to get our heads around and think that it's actually 24 hours in a day. Well, actually, the Earth spins on its axis 23 hours, 56 minutes and 4 seconds, which means that actually the 24 hours in a day that we have is actually a mean estimation, which means that actually even our clocks in our homes are not actually totally right. So it's everything that we look at in our modern world is based on a scientific idea or something to make it slightly more convenient so it fits into some kind of system so that we can actually make sense of something. It's definitely worth questioning things and remembering that even the clock in your house or the watch on your wrist isn't completely 100% accurate in accordance to the Earth's rotational axis, hence giving us things like leap years and things like that. So we kind of have to remember that we are all operating by a system that was created in order to make sense of chaos. So that's all I kind of wanted to say. I don't want to leave you on that thinking, oh my God, chaos. I'm living in chaos. I don't think Pisces would mind so much, but maybe the Capricorns are feeling a little bit uneasy right now. But anyway, so that's that. I just wanted to cover the 13th Zodiac sign. I hope I did a good job for you. Get in touch and let me know if you've got any thoughts on it or if you feel like you are an Ophiuchus and you would like to share some thoughts with me about what it's like to be an Ophiuchus and, maybe you've got your moon there. I would love to hear from you. And I would also love for you to check out, I'm launching in the new year in January my Patreon page, and I'm going to have some stuff on there for my new Patreons. I'm going to have a few I'll put a link below, but I'm planning on having like a kind of few monthly interpretations for you based on the moons, based on a kind of monthly outlook and kind of some of my thoughts and ponderings. It's just a way for me to be able to prioritise this podcast because it's increasingly difficult to prioritise when there's so many other things going on that require my time and attention and actually give me some kind of financial return, which I hate to break it down to something as basic as that. But it really is, I've got to survive in this world, so I have to make sure that this is one of the things that's actually putting a roof over my head and food in my belly. So I know you guys can relate to that. We all need sustenance. And it's been my pleasure recording this episode for you today. If you've enjoyed it, please give me a little review on iTunes. Give me 5 stars, give me a subscribe, and just put down, what you enjoyed about the podcast, whether it resonated with you. I know I didn't cover any listener charts today, but there's no way I could even try and interpret Ophiuchus in somebody's chart. Either way, it's been great talking to you guys today. Even though we are stuck in some crappy situations, this has been one hell of a year for us all. This podcast has helped me to stay sane and connect with some great people. Happy 2021. Happy New Year. I can't believe a whole year 2020 has gone by and it just feels like it was a smudge on the time on the history books. It's weird because 2020 so much stuff happened and also nothing happened at the same time. So stick with me into the new year and let's just start over. We're going to get going with a few more interesting episodes. We're going to get onto the planets. I'm definitely going to go into the houses. And on from there, who knows what we're going to be getting up to. But I've got lots planned for the coming months. So take care, you guys. I hope you're all good. Enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you're listening to me from. And I will speak to you next time. Bye now.